Trafalgar Law and Eustace Kid both suffered catastrophic defeats at the hands of Blackbeard and Shanks in 2023. As this is the final saga of One Piece, one might think that this is the end for both characters and that their time in the story is done. This video will take the opposite viewpoint and address why Law and Kid are far from done and are destined to surpass even Gold Roger. The main basis for this is the prophecy Goldie Roger found on Laugh Tale. In the Wano arc, it was revealed that after reaching the final island, Roger and his crew came to a realization that someone in the future would come and surpass them. Later in the arc, it is revealed that part of the prophecy involved pirates over 20 years after Roger's death swarming into the New World and changing history. If the statement's juxtaposition with the supernova facing off against the Yonko didn't make it apparent, this is clearly in reference to the worst generation. While one might think that the prophecy could reference just the Straw Hats, the use of the word swarming makes it clear that it is in fact several pirate crews. While the story has focused more on Joy Boy / Nika / Luffy being the prophesied figure who will change history, this page indicates that not only Luffy but the other pirates in his generation are extremely important. Putting it into perspective, the prophecy likely dates back over 800 years to the Void Century. Whoever wrote it viewed Luffy's generation of pirates as being important enough to be mentioned in the message left on the literal hardest to reach place in the world. Oden himself emphasized the significance of these pirates by thinking that they are guaranteed to take down someone as strong as Kaido. Another way to look at it is that the currently happening events of the story are the war the One Piece world has been building up towards for centuries, and that it will be Luffy's, not Roger's, generation who will be at the center of that conflict. In the history of the One Piece world, Roger is actually just a mere prelude to the actual legends who will take part in this battle. With this level of in-story build-up, it is very hard to believe that Law and Kid's role in the final saga ended up being nothing more than water boys for Blackbeard and Shanks to get their copies of the Road Poneglyphs. However, while I said that the prophecy is in reference to the worst generation, this may not strictly speaking be true. The only criteria the prophecy outlines is that the pirates who will change history entered the New World around the time of the present story. While the notable figures who entered the New World at this point were the worst generation, this does not mean that all the members of the worst generation are included in the prophecy, or that everyone outside the generation is excluded. As the frontrunners of the worst generation, Luffy and Blackbeard are almost guaranteed to be among the pirates referenced in the prophecy. They are both not only emperors of the sea, but Im, the literal king of the world and a potential survivor of the Void Century, was seen tearing apart both of their bounty posters. As an addendum to Luffy, Zoro is also more than likely included in the prophecy, and while they are not officially members of the worst generation, the other members of both Luffy and Blackbeard's crews are also likely included as well. For the rest of the worst generation, however, not everyone is clearly destined for greatness. Hawkins, for example, apparently died at the end of the Wano arc, with his importance amounting to a 320 million berry bounty and being Kaido's lackey. Meanwhile, Drake was actually never even a pirate and has been working for the Marines his entire time in the story. Of the so far unmentioned members of the worst generation, however, Law and Kid are clearly a cut above the rest in terms of importance. Both have earned 3 billion berry bounties as large as Luffy's. Both have also defeated a previous Emperor of the Sea in Big Mom, a feat only 2 other characters in the story have accomplished. And even though they've just been beaten, both are still some of the strongest pirates of their era, eclipsing the likes of Capone and Apu in terms of power. For a more thorough breakdown on Law's power, you could check out my video on why he had the biggest power-up in One Piece history during Wano. As addressed before, the prophecy implies there to be a host of pirates coming into the New World and changing history, not just the 2 crews of Straw Hats and Blackbeard pirates. While it is possible that characters like Uroge and Bonnie could seriously level up in the final saga, of the remaining supernova, Kid and Law are the natural choice to become major figures in this era due to the power and infamy they've gotten after the Wano arc. As a side note, it is actually possible that the Cross Guild is also included in the prophecy. Both Buggy and Crocodile entered the New World right before their time skip, the same time as most of the worst generation. The Cross Guild is also now one of the major powers of the One Piece world in the final saga, with Buggy having an even higher bounty than Luffy. Getting back to Kid and Law though, even if they are prophesied to be major figures in the final saga, there is still the question of what they can even do in the current story. Both have lost all of their Road Poneglyphs as well as their ships. Law also had his crew captured by Blackbeard, whereas we do not even know if Kid's currently alive considering that he's a Devil Fruit user who's about to drown without his ship. This next part of the video will look at how exactly Law and Kid could return to the story and still play a major role in the final saga, starting with Trafalgar Law. With Law's defeat at the hands of Blackbeard on Winter Island, his goal has likely switched to getting back at the Blackbeard pirates. While Teach took all of Law's poneglyph rubbings, Law's main concern would be in freeing the captured heart pirates. Law cares deeply for his crew, as we've seen in him sending them to Zou when he decided to go after Doflamingo, or when he gave himself up for Hawkins if it meant that the heart pirates would go free. Law even forbade Beppo to escape from Blackbeard if it meant that their crew would be left behind. Law getting the heart pirates back, however, is easier said than done. He already lost to Blackbeard, who only had half of his crew on Winter Island, and as we've also seen later in the Egghead arc, the second half of Blackbeard's crew was strong enough to take out someone as strong as Garp. Law would surely be wise enough to realize that he couldn't win in a direct confrontation with the Blackbeard pirates. For Law to even have a chance at coming back in the story, he would need to become more powerful. In One Piece, however, this can be accomplished very fast if a character fights other strong characters, as Law himself demonstrated on Onigashima. Shanks even doubles down on this notion by saying that the growth rate of young rookies shouldn't be underestimated. Looking at it this way, Law is in luck since a lot of powerful characters already want to fight him. As the possessor of the Ope Ope no Mi and a pirate with a 3 billion berry bounty, plenty of people in the New World likely want to capture or kill Law. However, we know that one character in particular has been gunning for Law even before his current level of infamy. At the end of Dressrosa, Akainu ordered Fujitora to not set foot in a marine base until he's captured both Law and Luffy. In the Reverie arc, we also saw that Akainu is still standing by these orders. While Fujitora took a liking to Luffy in Dressrosa, he does not share the same fondness for Law. Law is also a former warlord who abused his position, so Fujitora might even have a personal disdain towards him. After hearing the news that Law has lost both his ship and crew, Fujitora might finally take the opportunity to hunt him down. If these two characters were to butt heads, it could be a chance for Law to redeem himself. The fight could be a great way to see how far Law has come in the story, as Fujitora completely dominated him the last time they fought on Dressrosa. If Law actually succeeded in taking down a Navy admiral, he would certainly solidify his place as one of the main figures of his generation. A fight with an admiral could also push Law into a new realm of power, which he could use to once again pursue his goals, be it rescuing his crew from Blackbeard or going to Laugh Tale and finding out the true history. However, a fight between Law and Fujitora is just one path where the story could take Law's character. There are also other hanging plot threads that could be used for his character, such as Big Mom swearing vengeance on him and Kid, as well as the still unused Eternal Youth surgery of the Ope Ope no Mi. By the way, since you've made it this far into the video, you should puncture Willy the subscribe button to the bottom of a magma pool. The next part of the video will address Kid and how his return to the story could happen. For Eustace Kid, the thing that could save him from his current predicament of being beaten by Shanks is actually the location where he was beaten. While the kingdom of Elbaf is generally very wary of outsiders, Kid might actually be someone they'd welcome with open arms. This is because Kid is actually the man who defeated Big Mom, the sworn enemy of Elbaf. For reference, the Giants hate Linlin so much for having devoured Mother Caramel and the Lamb's House orphans that they don't even utter her name. While the Giant Warrior pirates helped Shanks in beating the Kid pirates, they likely did not know any of this. When Big Mom's feud with Elbaf began over 60 years ago, Dory and Brocky had already left the island and had been fighting on Little Garden for decades. Because of this, they are likely completely out of the loop regarding their racist feud with Big Mom and did not have any reason to see Kid as nothing more than an invader. If the Giants of Elbaf were to rescue the Kid pirates, Kid could spend his time on Elbaf recuperating from his loss to Shanks. The Giants could not only help him become stronger by training, they could also potentially share with him their remaining knowledge of Ohara that is kept on their island. The Giants could also help in constructing Kid a new ship to replace the Victoria Punk that was destroyed. This would be an interesting twist of fate, as the Giants are also possibly the shipwrights behind the Red Hair pirate ships, as evidenced by their Norse-themed prows. Like Law, Kid's main goal going forward would likely be in getting his vengeance on the Yonko who just defeated him. Considering how crushing Kid's defeat at Shanks' hands was, however, even a character as arrogant as him might realize that he'll need to become more powerful before going against the Red Hair pirates for a third time. It might even be that the Yonko Kid fights next isn't Shanks but Monkey D. Luffy. In the Jump Festa 2024 interview, Eiichiro Oda heavily implies that the Straw Hats would be going to Elbaf after the Egghead arc. If Kid is still in the area, this could finally lead to the two most infamous Supernova having their fight. Kid would certainly have a lot to gain in fighting Luffy and the Straw Hats. Luffy not only has 3 of the 4 road poneglyph ruffings, he also has a person on his crew who can read them in Robin. Kid could also likely become much stronger if he managed to defeat Luffy in a fight. While Luffy and Kid were tentative allies in Wano, Kid himself said that it would be a fight to the death after they left the island. The two have been rivals ever since Sabaody, and Elbaf could be the stage where Luffy finally gets to have a fight with a pirate from his own generation. While Luffy's had brief scuffles with Zoro, Blackbeard, Hawkins and Apu, none of these ever amounted to a full fight. Elbaf could also be where Kid finally becomes a full-blown antagonist in the story. This would actually be something very unique, as Luffy's enemies generally become his allies. Kid could be the first character in the story who does the opposite. This would be a rather natural shift, as based on his past actions, Kid can already be argued to be the most immoral member of the worst generation after Blackbeard. For reference, the reason why Kid had a higher bounty than Luffy on Sabaody was because he actually targeted civilians. The first thing Kid also did when he arrived in the New World was crucify a pirate crew who had already surrendered to him. Like with Law though, this is only one possible path Kid's character could take. Also like with Law, there are still other unused story elements that could be used to develop Kid's character. For example, we still do not know who the Sweet Commander Kid wounded actually was. I personally like the idea that Kid was brutal enough to take Smoothie's right eye, which is why Smoothie always covers that side with her hair. However, this is just my personal speculation. One idea that could be used to add to Kid's character pertains to his birth. We know that Kid was born 23 years ago in the South Blue, which is an extremely interesting piece of lore. This is because Goldie Roger spent his last days as a free man in the South Blue with Portsca's D. Rogue, Ace's mother. After Roger's execution, the government went on a manhunt in the South Blue looking for mothers or newborns who could be connected to Roger. While this is also just speculation, because of the unfortunate timing of Kid's birth, it could be that Kid's mother was one of the women caught in the government's manhunt. This could, for example, help explain where Kid's insane drive to become Pirate King comes from. To recap, this video argues that because of the future the Roger pirates discovered on Laugh Tale, Kid and Law are both destined to come back and play a major role in the final saga. For Law, this could be for example in him finally getting to fight Fujitora hundreds of chapters after the Dressrosa arc. For Kid, he could potentially be saved by the Giants as thanks for taking down Big Mom, while Kid himself could attack the Straw Hats pirates after they arrive in Elbaf. One final thing I'd like to address in this video is the question of whether Kid and Law should even come back in the first place. Even if they're meant for greatness by in-story prophecies, this arguably shouldn't take precedent over the good of the story. One Piece is certainly not above changing aspects of the previous story to improve the present one. This is the same argument I brought up in my video on Kaido and Big Mom's possible return, where the final saga might just be better off cutting out characters like this to make room for others such as Shanks, Blackbeard or Dragon. I'm also going to bring up the same counter-argument as I did in that video, where Law and Kid's further inclusion would simply be worth the added time for the story. While this is the final saga, the manga in Egghead alone has introduced literally dozens of new characters to the story. On top of this, several characters whose last time being relevant was in the pre-timeskip have all of a sudden re-emerged in the story. Considering how much build-up there is behind Kid and Law, it is very hard to see them getting dropped out of the story so unceremoniously when far less significant characters are getting the red carpet rolled in front of them. The main benefit of keeping Kid and Law active in the story beyond any prophecies is that it makes Luffy have an actual pirate generation of his own. Roger himself had numerous other great pirates as his rivals during his era, many of whom were stronger than any of the characters currently in Luffy's generation. For Luffy, a man who's supposed to surpass Roger in every regard, to only have one true pirate rival in Blackbeard could be a big disservice to the One Piece story. One final point I'd like to bring up is simply the name the world has started to call Luffy's generation. From the government's perspective, they could quite literally be the worst generation. I've already brought it up before in this video, but my channel has another video very similar to this one regarding Kaido and Big Mom's possible return to the story. If you like my content, consider giving it a watch. Be warned though, it's almost 27 minutes in length. Other than that though, thanks for watching this video to the end.